And so that might be why Mushi-Shi is rated #1 on a few lists as best anime to fall asleep to, because you
Oh,
can just sort of like at the end of the night sit and reflect
yeah,
and go to bed.
that's fantastic. Well, on that note, Rio, why don't you
Mhm.
charm us with your Mushishi tale?
Of course. And so I think this is actually a really good segue from your Tatsu chosen episode to this one. It deals, well, it has some visual themes that are similar and some concrete details that are connected to Ginkgo's origin story, namely the light and dark, as well as how Ginkgo sees and literally his eyes. So the episode starts, as almost all episodes do, with that song, that sort of Simon and Garfunkel
Yep.
meets Oasis meets Cafe Singer, just sort of, to realign you after your long hard day. You've come home, you're watching anime. Okay, it's okay. I'm just gonna center myself, and we're gonna watch an episode of Mushi-Shi. So we start on a boy entering this shed, this storage house, and inside is this blindfolded girl dressed in all white, and she has a black blindfold on. And we find out that her name is Sui, and his name is Biki. And then we get the title card, the light in the eyelid. And this is a gray background, white writing, and this is sort of important and something that I kind of want to talk about later about the color themes of each of the episodes. But Biki is concerned for his friend Sui, who has a, I'm gonna air quote, sickness, and Sui is aware of Mushi living in her eye, or both eyes. And then we hear a voiceover of Biki talking about how Sui is the youngest daughter of a wealthy household, and 6 months ago she started feeling pain when light hits her eyelids, and that's what they're calling this illness. But doctors are baffled, and they've all but given up. They don't know what to do. And her condition continued to worsen, and then Sui was handed off from her, main wealthy family to a sort of subservient lesser family to be taken care of. And that means just putting her in this dark shed that doesn't let in very much light. Um, so Biki is kind of an intuitive kid, and he sort of gets that maybe this is a little bit more than just what's best for her, you know.
Mhm.
And by the way, the story does sort of revolve around these two kids. Biki, I would say, is the protagonist of the episode. This is sort of like the bread and butter of Mushi-Shi, in that we're watching a story, a human story unfold, and Ginkgo will come later.
Mm.
He's not a hero necessarily, although this one does get close to that. He's just part of the story. We're watching a story about Biki and his friend Sui, which is so cool.
Mhm.
Um, so he's the one that sort of changes her bandages, goes into the shed, and like spends time with her. They play in the shed, and Sui, on one of these occasions, tells him about the second set of eyelids that we all have. And what this is that you close your physical eyes and you might see some things moving around in there. That's just you um, looking at the back of your eyelids. But there's a second set that if you close, you can sit in complete darkness and see no light from the outside. And when you do, inside, she can see Mushi. So Biki's not really able to do this. He doesn't understand. He just closes his eyes and it's dark. But Sui reveals to Biki, and I guess to us, the viewers, that there is a stream made of light below them. And this is the introduction of one of the sort of, I would even say, recurring characters of the show.
Mm.
Is we're later told it's a Komyaku Suji, which is a sort of vein or a channel of light. And what this light is a collection of mushi, glowing mushi. They're sort of wayward in passing, either gaining or losing life. It's their sort of like passage, almost the river Styx of mushi. But I think it kind of goes both ways as well. And so she describes this stream that she sees, and when she looks into it, because she's very much drawn to it like a moth to a flame, she wants to stare at it for a long time, approach it, but whenever she watches it for too long, a man appears, a man with white hair and one eye, and tells her to stop, to don't go any further. So we obviously know who this is. But she doesn't know. And another thing I love about Mushi-Shi's storytelling, like, that's where we get the main character in a vision, kind of offhand. We'll get to him later. This is a story about Sui and Biki. So Biki obviously is concerned. He's not really sure what to make of this. And then he speaks to his mother, and his mother reprimands him for spending too much time in the shed. And she's worried basically that he'll contract her illness. And, you know, she essentially in that moment also admits that her family, Sui's family, essentially abandoned her. But what mom says to Biki is stay with her so that she doesn't lose the light in her soul. Interesting thing that I think will come back later. So Sui receives a message from someone that they will be arriving soon. And this is just sort of such a nice, subtle way to say to us, the viewer, hey, something's coming. If we think about it for 2 more seconds, it's, oh, Ginkgo's coming. But it's so simple because it's just like a dark background, Sui just kind of floating in the middle and saying, oh, you're coming. and that's all. But it's so cool because it's so evocative without even showing us anything. What then happens is that Biki suddenly begins to show signs of the illness, and we get this like crazy. So he's sitting up at night reading this book with a candle flickering in front of him, and all of a sudden we get a close up on his eyes, and then the sound of like crunching as his eyeballs almost like grow within their sockets. Sound is such a cool like element of the show, and you can just feel it when it and so obviously, you know, he has contracted a form of the illness. And then obviously his mother freaks out and forbids him from going to the shed, and instead she goes, delivers food to Sui, and says, you know, she doesn't even face her. She just puts the food in, leaves. But before she does, she says, it is not your fault. He shouldn't have been so compassionate. As if the worst thing he could have done is care for her. Mother's distraught. And this is when Ginkgo appears, and he's sort of the like I said, Deus Ex Machina of this one. He comes and he fixes Biki's eyes. He's like, this is a lesser form of Mushi, and his is young. He just they just I guess made it into his eyes. They can easily come out as long as he's in the light and not in the dark too much. Sui, on the other hand, a little bit harder. By the way, he introduces himself as a Mushi-Shi, a Mushi master, and that this is his purview. He's got this. And we're sort of calmed. Okay, someone's here. Things are going to be okay. And another cool thing about Ginkgo is that we never have to worry about him. He's going to be okay. Like, he's got it. The other people, on the other hand, we'll see. So then we get this nightmarish vision of Sui, and it's almost immediately following, you know, being told by the mother that, you know, Biki shouldn't have cared for you. And it's her just floating inside the stream of light and the river of light, tears streaming down her eyes behind the black blindfold, and she's just repeatedly apologizing to Biki. It's tragic. This is one of the most, I think, as emotional as this show gets. But even that is a nightmare, because then Biki wakes up. It's not real, but it kind of is. And then we learn the name of the Mushi, which is Manako no Yami, which is the darkness in the eye. And, you know, Biki figures out that Ginkgo is the man from Sui's visions. And Ginkgo says he will start treating her after sundown. So when next we see Sui, things have gotten way worse. She went towards the light. She went all the way into the light. Her eyes are gone, basically just holes, smoking pits in her head. And then she comes out of the shed, and it's harrowing. She's all in white, which, as you might know, is a color that represents death in Japanese and other Asian cultures. Her eyes are open, but there's nothing, just black holes. And Ginkgo tells her to leave your eyelids open, but then close your second eyelids. And then what happens is, it borders on body horror. This liquid starts pouring out of her eyes, and then like towards the moon, there's Ginkgo ready and standing as this thing just whoosh, starts shooting out of both eye sockets, and he's got his glove on and ready, and catches this little snake centipede looking thing, and then he's like, all right, good, close them. She closes her eyes, and the sort of wave subsides. There's like gloopy mushi everywhere, and he's grabbing whatever was probably causing the pain. Now, this is sort of a rare instance where Ginkgo actually vanquishes a mushi. I mean, fairly simple. He just pinches and it turns into ash and it's gone. But the rest of it, all the fluid, is also mushi, evidently. And then we get one of the elusive moments of levity in Mushi-Shi episodes, where Biki's just freaking out. He's flabbergasted. And Ginkgo's like, yo, chill. It's okay. I got this. And then Ginkgo removes one of his eyes, which turns out to be a fake glass eye. And what he does is he injects some of the liquid mushi into it, which gives it life and vision. And he gives, because Sui's eyes are both gone, he gives one to her. And he's like, you'll be able to see with this one. And then we get a voiceover. And this happens often in Mushi-Shi. And this voiceover is this sort of seasoned female voice. It starts off a lot of episodes describing Mushi. And do you guys know who this is?
No.
That's Nui. Nui is the one that Tatsu discussed. He's Ginkgo's teacher. She is the one that does the voiceover, almost like reading from a tome of folklore about Mushi. So it's almost like every time we get that, it's calling back to her describing to Ginkgo what Mushi are, what they do. And he's recollecting sort of what she had said. And in this one, she says, it is said that man forgot to close his second eyelids once he found light. Forgot how to close the second eyelids once. So over time, we have found light, and we no longer need, the second eyelids. True darkness, otherworldly light. And of the otherworldly light is that Komyaksuji, apparently. And she also says it's probably better off because many people lost their sight staring too long into the stream. And then we get something that's also common in Mushi-Shi episodes, which is that it's sort of a recollecting voiceover. Sometimes it's Ginkgo, sometimes it's a character, and they're like, here's what happened afterwards. We don't experience it. It's just like And this is like slowly stepping away from the story, from the people, and that's what Ginkgo does physically every time he goes away. We get to step away and start to experience, as Biki sort of describes, seeing the stream. So while Ginkgo was there, even Biki started to be able to see the stream of light, the Komyakusuji, which is a little sort of hint as to Ginkgo's abilities to impart this sort of ability to others as well. And then later, Sui appears in this bright orange kimono. It's daylight, and she's smiling. And this is definitely one of the happier endings that we get from Mushi-Shi. And then Biki wonders if Ginkgo lost his eye the same way. Who knows? We actually know exactly how he lost it. And then we quietly close on a shot of Ginkgo sitting, facing away from the stream in darkness. Credits. That's the eyelids. Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Right.
The first thing I just want to comment on is, I mean, in the United States, in American culture, these stories, they have might say they have a Japanese Gothic feel. But when you look at how the Gothic emerged in Western culture as a critique of Enlightenment-driven rationalism, and is the idea that human beings can know everything and they can think their way through everything and actually overcome context and escape it. I liked a little bit at the end about humans forgot about this place when they saw the light, because when they found light, it's almost as if they found an unbalanced way of being, right? A way that gets to pretend that this other reality, that they're not part of it. And to be honest, that explains quite a bit about why Gothic literature was written, right? Because it always invoked the supernatural. It always revealed the folly of a commitment to hyper rationalism, and so I see that parallel in what we will call Gothic literature and these folk tales as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think I chose this episode for a few reasons, but one of them is that this was so Yuki Urashibara is the original creator, the mangaka that created the concept and the manga of Mushi-Shi. After dropping out of university, this was her submission to Monthly Afternoon, the magazine, and this won the Monthly Afternoon 4 Seasons award. It was this episode that was later named The Light Behind the Eyelid that won, that basically put her on the map on the magazine.
Fantastic.
It wasn't the first episode. So what is it called? The Green Throne is the first episode and is the first chapter of the manga. But this one was the one that she put out in the world as, hey, this is what Mushi-Shi is about. And I think it's so densely encapsulated with all of the themes that, and it sort of shows you what we are to expect. So it's kind of strange to me because I feel like the first episode, the Green Throne, has more things that are sort of not necessarily in line with the rest of the show. But this one, it's like, all right, we are on track. The train has left the station. Here's what you have to expect for the rest of the show. And for some reason, like, even if there are years apart from me watching, and I have a terrible memory, this one, even if it's just like the evocative images, this one sticks in my head without a doubt.
And I think the reason that it is, it's like this episode is like the calibration, right? Like it orients your senses, and like, you know that the whole time during this show they're gonna mess with your senses. And like they're like, I think it's so clever because it, like you say a lot, Scott, like you can't escape the context. You can't escape the context of your senses. If you close your eyes, of course you see those like floating things that are moving around. Those are mushi. Like that's the thing. Like, and
hey, you can see Mushi too.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, oh, okay, like I'm in, right? But like, yeah, the way like, and they get you with it too, because you'll just be like watching, all of a sudden crunch, like, oh,
Yeah.
like, oh man, like I'm definitely at that. You're like, oh, like you feel that, right? Like, you know, like you genuinely felt that like crunch in your eyes, and you're just like, oh man, like this is gonna be something.
And I always recommend watching Mushi-Shi with headphones, because the sound is such a careful element of the show. This episode, a lot of the first part, no music even, maybe some nature sounds. I mean, when stuff goes down, obviously there's going to be some suspenseful music. You know they're happening, but yeah, I always recommend that.
Well, yeah, I think it's also interesting that, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It's interesting that I feel like the Mushi are kind of sound itself in a way. And that's why, like, when they're moving, it's like music, because like they are the essence of sound.
It literally is sometimes. There are tracks that you hear and you're like, oh, this is Mushi stuff. Mushi stuff's happening. These are Mushi sounds. And also the soundtrack, the score, there's a unique and individual score per episode that is composed by Toshiro Masuda, which is probably better known for doing the music for Naruto. But slightly different tone, obviously, but you definitely get those sort of synth sounds mixed with very traditional Japanese instruments, and I think he does a pretty good job.
I also wanted to comment on the line you mentioned earlier, when the mother scolds him, you cared about her too much, right? On the one hand, we hear that, and I don't know what I mean when I say we. I'll just say myself. I hear that and I think, how can you care too much? But that's exactly the story of Ashitaka, right? It's the curse of being and caring. And when you be and you care, what does that do? It takes you to where the problems are, right? And when you get to where the problems are, all kinds of unintended consequences take place. And I'm always amazed at writers who can let that happen. And I don't feel like I'm being talked to. I feel like I'm witnessing, and that is an accomplishment, because most of the stuff most stuff I watch is protagonist identity driven, and I feel like I'm the writer is the protagonist is a vehicle for the writer's worldview. And I love it when, like, I think the Coen brothers do a fantastic job of letting characters just be different beings interacting in the best they can with each other. And that's very much the vibe I get, when I watch this show. Caring too much. I just love how they don't let that be a platitude, right? They what does that mean? And I love it.
Yep.